Alright, so with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire officially released, we now have a total of 5 Ghostbusters films in this franchise. Especially with this franchise that remains iconic, especially with the Ghostbusters, its iconic theme, and even with the films that are like beloved by everyone, in which some of one of them or more is bad, but even so, like this franchise is remained iconic that everyone grew up with and so much more. And so in this video, we're breaking all 5 Ghostbusters films from worst to best, give you guys my thoughts and opinions on why it's ranked in this ranking, and just give you guys my opinion, especially with this franchise that we all know and love so much as well. And so if you're new here, then be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future vids. But now let's get into this ranking. And now, coming in at last place at number 5 and dead last is Ghostbusters from 2016. And now, I got to admit, I was a teenager when this movie came out, and I saw it literally when it came out back in July of 2016. And even with this remake of the Ghostbusters that had a female cast with Melissa McCarthy, I think Kristen Wiig, and with Chris Hemsworth, it was so bad, especially as it had horrible writing, a horrible cast. Even as they tried to remake everything that the original Ghostbusters had, and then tried to adapt everything into this remake, especially with having a lame dialogue, especially with having the same things and the same themes and elements that were in the original film all the way into this one. It was so bad. Plus, I don't even remember like a thing or two after watching that whole horrible movie. And besides, it's like a horrible remake of the Ghostbusters, and like it doesn't even represent what this film is, especially as it's like a horrible remake, especially with Hemsworth's character. That is like, I don't know if I liked his character or not, but even with the female cast, it sort of was alright, but it wasn't matching the same tone as the original Ghostbusters did. But even with this remake, that was a complete ripoff. And now, coming in next at number 4 is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And now, even with why I put this in, because even that this is a continuation and a follow-up from Ghostbusters Afterlife, which we followed the Spengler family back in New York City. We are back with the Firehouse with the OG cast. And I gotta say, I want to like this movie. I really liked it. It's really good. It's really decent. It's really solid. But at the same time, it kind of felt like really generic, and just like felt like really off. It had like too many subplots and too many characters, and even it took like a long time to introduce the villain of what the Ghostbusters are up against. Even with trying to blend in the new and the OG cast, it sort of worked, but at the same time, it was all like a nostalgia bait to try to get the audience to love this movie. And even though I don't know why it's getting hated on by everyone, but even though it's a continuation, plus I liked Afterlife, which I'll get to in a bit in this ranking. But even with Frozen Empire, even like towards the third act, towards the end of the movie, that's where it really comes together. But really with Frozen Empire, I thought it was good, but it's not a great or fantastic movie. It's just a good, solid entry that doesn't really add up. Plus, I like the new cast at their in New York City, but there are some things that I really didn't like, but it's just a good enough movie. And now, next up is Ghostbusters 2. And now, especially with that, this is the sequel to the original Ghostbusters, that with this movie that came out way back in 1989, is that we follow the Ghostbusters that are out of work, that are no longer in business, but especially as they come out of retirement to help Dana with this new threat, and that like threatens the entire city. And even with Dana and Peter's relationship, that's explored a ton more in this movie, especially with that dinner scene, and even with the story that is centered around Dana's child, especially for when it gets taken, and even with the Ghostbusters in the final act of the movie, and even to rescue the baby. And that even though I somehow like that story, it does not quite hold up. Even with the villain at the end, it's sort of like clunky in like a way, but even throughout the entire movie, it's just like a good enough time. There's some good moments, especially with good humor, especially with the 4 Ghostbusters, but it does really hold up the same as much as the original one did, but because even with the original film that remains iconic, but even with the second movie and even towards the third act is where it really goes down, especially with the Statue of Liberty in the third act, and it's just like the same thing that happened at the end of the first movie, but even with the third act with the Statue of Liberty, it was so cool, but with the sequel, I think I enjoyed it. And now, next up on the list is Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, I remember when I saw this movie for when it came out back in 2021, and I even rewatched it in order to prep up for Frozen Empire, but even going in this movie, it was like a fresh start for this franchise. It was like brand new, and plus, it was directed by Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, that directed the first two movies, and even with Afterlife, which I really enjoyed, I thought it was really, really good, and in fact, that had like a new cast with Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, Paul Rudd, and there's so much more, and it really explored more, especially with the plot, with the Spangler family that moves to like a farmhouse in the middle of the road and in the middle of nowhere. So especially for where their grandfather died, and even exploring this evil that like a Phoebe Spangler wants to investigate, and plus to become a real Ghostbuster, especially with Trevor, and that's a pretty interesting character, and you were lucky that even with their chemistry between Trevor and Lucky, it's really good in this movie. But even with the OG Ghostbusters, that even had like some hint, even like showed a little bit of their involvement while trying to keep this movie fresh with like a fresh start with the new cast. But even though at they show up in like the final showdown to help defeat the villain, it was so cool. Just have the OG Ghostbusters back, but it will later lead into a Frozen Empire, especially after that post-credit scene with the firehouse. Especially like as I liked it, I thought it was a cool legacy sequel that combined the new and OG cast just a little bit. And lastly, coming in at number 1 is Ghostbusters, and this is the original movie that came out in 1984, and this is why it remains iconic, because it literally introduced like 4 men who want to create their own business by busting some ghosts and to complete a mission to make the citizens of New York City proud, and again defeat like evil things such as ghosts. Even throughout the movie starts, and even throughout it ends, especially with the third act of that rooftop battle, and even with that 100 feet like a marshmallow man and that like looks around New York City, which I enjoyed by the way, and even with the 4 Ghostbusters, especially in the shot in the third act, it just remains iconic, especially with its theme, and that's how literally every Ghostbusters movie opens, because with the theme that remains iconic. I mean, it was just like 4 men that were out of a job that want to create their own business, as they call themselves, the Ghostbusters, and yeah, I think with the first movie, that remains iconic. And so, there you have it. This is my ranking of all the Ghostbusters movies in this franchise, especially as these remain iconic with its theme, and even with having the new cast in it as well, as they become part of this beloved franchise, as they will want to bust some ghosts, and even to make citizens proud. And I gotta say, I like this franchise, even though I may not like some of these movies, but even though this franchise remains iconic and so much more as well. And so, that is going to be it for this video, and just let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, and what would you rank all these Ghostbusters movies in this franchise? I would like to hear your ranking. Just let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and turn on notifications about future videos, and also follow all my social medias, which are linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.